On this episode of the show, I have with me Marty Ringline. He is co-founder and CEO at Agree.com. And we're going to be talking about how history repeats itself, and especially within technology. And we'll talk about some of those technology evolutions, how sometimes the biggest inventions aren't things people ask for. And we'll have a couple examples in there, and we'll talk about the AI ecosystem. And obviously, there's a lot of different thoughts around that, and some of it is around fear, and we'll talk about how that's affecting the AI landscape, and we'll also talk about Agree.com and a little bit about how that's a great use case of helping with some automation and helping, salespeople and people who deal with contracts, and that'll be a good use case. Marty, thanks for taking the time.
No, appreciate you having me here. I'm excited.
Absolutely. All right. Well, before we start, could you tell everyone what you guys do there at Agree?
Yeah, so the easiest way to describe it, it's a better DocuSign. The best part is it's totally free, but it also integrates invoicing and payments. So at the end of most signatures, somebody has to pay somebody money. Now you don't have to go to 3 different platforms to do it, but we give the e-signature part away for free, the invoicing part away for free, and then we just make money the same way Stripe does. So when somebody swipes that credit card, the 2.9 and 30, or the ACH, the wire, and we charge the same transaction fees as Stripe. So you get to stop paying for DocuSign, stop paying for QuickBooks or Bill.com, and then just have integrated faster payment processing.
There you go. That sounds pretty awesome as well. And this topic, talking about history and technology and how history typically repeats itself with, human evolution and, in this case, technology. I guess let's start there. Let's talk about the evolution of technology. And maybe what we can discuss is, you mentioned sometimes that there are a lot of things out there that people use that we've not actually asked for. They're just things that appear in society, and we just start using them. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think of, go back to the telephone. We all have a smartphone in our pocket. So, what's the origin of that? But the telephone itself, pretty silly device the day that it's invented, because it's completely useless unless there's 2 of them. And then you need to know the other person that has one. And so it's one of these devices that only makes sense when there's a network effect. But up until that moment, nobody's walking around, asking for this device in which I can pick up and immediately talk to somebody. We have things, like walkie-talkies, we have the telegram. And so I think we think of hey, are there iterations where I wish the walkie-talkie went over longer distances? Are there places where I wish the telegram got, there faster or with more reliability but nobody asked for, specifically, the telephone. And then same with kind of the automobile. We had the horse and carriage, but nobody was thinking through hey, what if we got rid of the horse? I think they thought through, hey, what if it was more comfortable? What if it wasn't as bumpy? What if the horse could go further? What if I didn't have to feed the horse or give water to the horse? What happens if the horse never died? But nobody ever said, hey, I want a gasoline powered, mechanical device that I would sit in with, automatic windows and a radio. These are all just evolutions that kind of happen. So I get really excited when I think through the things that will fundamentally change our lives. We don't even know to ask for them yet. And there are going to be these small iterative adaptations and evolutions of the things that we use today.
I love it. And, I was actually, in preparation for this episode, I was actually talking to another guest, and I said something clicked in my head when I read through my notes and what we're going to talk about. I was like, human beings, ever since the beginning of the very first invention, have been heading towards everything and anything that simplifies our lives. Obviously, that reptile brain, it wants to save energy. It wants us to do nothing. It wants us to literally be prepared for disaster. So we want to conserve energy. We don't have any of those dangers necessarily, but that reptile brain still sits there. And I was thinking about that, and I was like, if you think about fire, I mean, I'm sure we ate dead raw carcass. I mean, at some point, that had to be how it was done until someone, I don't even still know. I mean, there's no way to know, but the notion of fire to cook food, how would you think this hot thing that I can't get my hand near, I'm going to take a piece of meat and I'm going to get it really close to the flame, and then I'm going to try to eat that. Must have been accidental. I don't know the origin, but to the notion of what we're talking about, of things that we didn't ask for. I would argue if you go way back, hundreds of thousands of millions of years, whenever fire was invented and someone decided to cook with fire, I mean, it all just has been progressing from there. And I think what you mentioned is pretty interesting. Society, though, and again, we could talk about the telephone. We could talk about cooked meat. I mean, as preposterous as it sounds, we typically avoid anything that's brand new. We look at it. We typically put it down. We're negative. And then slowly when we see others doing it and we start again, our reptile brain, oh, people aren't dying, people aren't, etc. Hey, I should give this a try. That's what happens, right?
Yeah, we have that pessimistic view. And I think when it comes to sort of the innovation chasm, there are early adopters and then there's your late laggards. And most folks are going to be late laggards and they're going to fall on the other side of it and they're going to be pessimists to start. But then I think the innovators, the founders, the entrepreneurs, as we talk about them today, they're going to be your early adopters. They're going to do the thing that doesn't make sense, that's uncomfortable, that breaks, that's, ridiculed, and then it'll either prove right or prove wrong. And I think, we see it with AI. It's going to take our jobs, and we talk about all the negativities around it. It hallucinates. It puts 6 fingers on it. We don't realize, what will it do tomorrow? Like if it's broken today, but it's incredible that it can even do what it's broken. Like what will it do when it stops becoming broken and it gets better or enhanced? Autonomous driving is the same way. We love it when a Tesla's in an accident, and we love it if they were on self-driving mode when it happens, and never going to work, never going to happen. But it still turns out that human drivers are the second cause of death to children under the age of 16. Unfortunately, the first one is guns, and so that's another problem for another day. But cars and humans, they're bad. And so, but what happens when the Tesla gets better or the Waymo gets better? The world will fundamentally change. And so I do think about this pessimist versus optimist and sort of the human nature to be pessimist or to have this inclination of that'll never work, or really just change. And what I think, we could talk about this all day long, but my last thought on it is it's the uncomfortability with not knowing what's around the corner, not being able to predict or see the future. So what will happen when AI, will it take my job? Will there be a new, better? Some people say there'll be a new, better job. Then my question is, okay, fine, I'm ready to be an optimist, but what's the new, better job? It's we don't know yet. And that's how it works. Well, that makes me scared and that makes me terrified. And then I'm going to naturally be a pessimist to it.
Yeah, and that's actually a great point. And I would assume, as you mentioned, transition from horse to automobile, there were people in the horse carriage industry that probably felt similar to what we're seeing now. I guess when it comes to AI, and I guess, bring it back to modern times, it's moving really fast, but also maybe all these other technology evolutions were able to grow, bubble, go through a particular cycle of evolution, of adoption, without the attention that things get today. And I do wonder if we went back to, even the cloud, even mobile devices. When mobile devices came out, there wasn't really a way to talk about them. I mean, we heard about them. It took a while for people to start transitioning from, I don't want a screen, might break, to I'm still comfortable with my small device. We talk a lot about AI. I mean, we're on this show talking about AI. I talk about AI. It's talked about all the time everywhere. I wonder if the sheer volume of conversation on AI and the attention now we can provide these things doesn't give the actual technology a little bit of breathing room to kind of go through its infancy, its crawling stage, its falling down stage.
Yeah, and I think, if we go back to when we first got the written word, when we first got the printing press, these things were ridiculed at the time. We said the same things we say now, where they'll destroy human society and people will operate differently, and it'll be all for the worse. Turned out not to be true. They turned out to be some of the greatest contributions to human civilization ever. But you have people like Plato and Socrates, honestly, candidly having arguments about the demise of human civilization if we have the written word and we stop orating. And same principles with the horse and carriage manufacturers, where Plato's an orator by trade. Like the written word puts him out of a job. Turns out he's pretty good with the written word himself, but his craft, how people know him at the time, right? It's not until thousands of years later that he's famous for writing, but at the time he's famous for speaking. And that's going to disrupt that, because why go listen to anybody when you can just put your head in the book, the same way we'd stick our head in the screen today. And so I do think, AI is very much in that same camp, because every time there's been an introduction of a disruptive technology, we've always said the same thing, but this time it's different. And this time it moves a little bit faster. And I think, to your point, yes, the technology is moving faster, even though we got introduced to the GPT-3 beta 5 years ago. We got ChatGPT 3 years ago. Like, it's moving kind of slow. Like, we read articles that it's disrupting, but it has not actually, no one's job is gone because ChatGPT does that same job. Yes, CEOs have said, hey, we're doing layoffs, but because they don't want their stock to plummet, they need a really good reason to do the layoff. And if you can say AI, that's a really good narrative reason to do it. And it makes you look cool, forward, progressing. But find me one person's job who no longer exists because ChatGPT does the job. That is nonsensical. And so I do think the fear comes from that. But yeah, the dissemination of information, the speed at which that's happening has increased this level of pessimism, which I think increases this level of fear. But we see it beyond just technology adaptation. We saw it obviously in misinformation. We see it in how we think about politics and news. Everything's negative in the news itself. Very hard to find a good, heartwarming story of something good that happened because it doesn't get the clicks.
Yeah, I think I mentioned it on a previous pod of how much AI code is really deployed. We've heard very big tech companies mention decent percentages, 20, 30%. I'm never going to see it. I love to actually see that, because I don't believe it. I think, as you alluded to, I think it is a good label to slap on to some layoffs, and it doesn't look like you're having a financial issue to say AI is taking all those jobs. Sure, great narrative. I guess when we talk about, when we talk about people not asking for something and then getting it and adopting it, I guess when it comes to something like, an AI first product, right? In this case, we'll use the use case of what you guys do, because I think, obviously gives us something tangible to work with. And if you're a salesperson, there's been its natural evolution for the last 75 to 100 plus years. Past that, door to door, in person, it's all evolved to fax, to email, to social media, all that. Everyone knows that. I don't need to go over it. And then obviously there's a contract piece that goes with that, and we've seen the same evolution with that as well. And I guess the thing that maybe sometimes we don't look at is we are creatures of habit. We do get good at doing something, and then to have to go do something but with a new learning activity does pose. And I personally think the reason we get the pessimism is because that's a natural rejection of me wanting to have to be forced to go spend energy to learn. It's not something I want to do if I'm in my 30s, 40s, 50s and I've been doing a job. I don't want to go necessarily have to relearn a whole way of doing something. I've mastered something. I guess when you look at salespeople, you look at contracts, and you look at the opportunity of going, you know what, we're not taking anyone's job away. We're actually being a value add. Talk us through how a product can be a value add without the notion that we're actually taking something away.
Yeah, to me, I just had this funny conversation with our own CTO at Agree, where he's fallen in love with this tech called cogen.com. So quick little plug. It sits on top of Linear. So it gets to the point where I can write a ticket in Linear, and then I can push it to Cogen, and it can start writing code and put it into production. Now, it's not going to do anything on the money movement side, the regulatory side, the compliance side. It's not that great, but it'll give me low-hanging fruit product features that would have sit at the bottom of our priority list for months. It can do them in 30 minutes. And that's an amazing feat. But what it doesn't do, it doesn't remove the necessity for an engineer on my team. What it means is that my engineers can go do the bigger, harder things and more of them faster. So I think the same thing with sales folks. I don't want to displace a salesperson's job with AI. I want them closing bigger deals that require human interaction, human empathy, human conversation, and not dealing with the low-hanging fruit, tactical logistics of their job, like following up with a late payment. Why is a salesperson doing that? Why is somebody from finance telling them that their deal, their client didn't pay, and they've got to go email them and track them down and go back and forth on wire information? That should be all automated. That's silly. Why is a salesperson taking an executed sales agreement, giving it to someone in finance? Why is someone in finance manually opening that document and typing in to an invoicing tool to create an invoice to send out? Like, that should be automated, because the finance person has bigger tasks to do. And when you had mentioned earlier about, like, agents or even AI writing more code, what I think there's a lot of narrative on Twitter right now, a VC saying, hey, I talked to a founder who says, they wrote 1 billion lines of code in the last 30 days. And part of me thinks, why does any application have 1 billion? Like, that's a red flag, not a green flag. But if I go back to history repeats itself, the better technology gets, the bigger things we do with that technology. So it used to be that most of my digital life lived on about a dozen floppy disks, 1.3 megabytes, right? And some of them were a little bit larger, but let's just call it 1.3. And I could do that on about a dozen. We had this little cartridge and they sat in there, and that was my entire existence. Today, my individual Netflix account, I will stream terabytes of data, just me personally, all by myself, which is wild, just on one platform, Netflix. So when I think about, like, code, the Collison brothers at Stripe were famous for building Stripe on 7 lines of code. Now, I think that's a really long line, right? But there were 7 of them. But today, yeah, you might do thousands of lines of code and you might do them faster, but that's because we're going to do bigger things than those 2 brothers did with the first version of Stripe. And so I don't think this is a depletion of jobs. I think this is we're going to expect bigger things to be done, and we're going to need more humans to do them, and we're going to need tools that allow us to do them at a scale we've never comprehended before. And then I think my ask is, don't be a pessimist and be like, fine, prove it. What are we going to do? I don't know. I didn't know I was going to stream terabytes of data, in 2005. I didn't know that I would be looking for my life partner swiping on an app on a phone. I didn't know that when I went to the bathroom and I spent 5 minutes in there that I'd be selling stocks of Nike. Like I didn't know that was ever going to be. I didn't know that I'd be hailing, a black car to come pick me up, to take me from point A to B. Like, it's just things we don't know, but they're inevitable, and they're coming, and they're going to be exciting, but they're going to be bigger. And we're going to need more people to do them.
Yeah, it's I agree with you. I think we've been talking about just the enabling effects of technology, and I guess when you look at, and I guess maybe part of the issue is when people are given time. I think there's a principle out there that time tends to expand and occupy whatever space you give it. We've been given lots of tools. We've been given Uber Eats. People Uber Eats, and with the time, it's not that they might have done something else. They probably just spend more time watching Netflix. For an example, I'm sure there's some people that Uber Eats and work because they want to save the time. But I'd also argue there's probably lots that take advantage of the convenience to gain the time to actually still fill it with less valuable stuff in the trade-off. And I think sometimes there is this push-pull of how we use technology. When you look at AI, and obviously we don't know, what are some technologies, and maybe you don't have an answer to this, it's okay too. What are some technologies that we can look back, and again, not military applications, but technology that we look back and go, you know what? Society actually took a hit for that. Like, it actually did us a disservice. I mean, obviously we went through the telephone and the car and the printing press. These are all been net positive effects. Can you come up with one or two that you go, you know what, this last technology, boom, it really screwed us?
Yeah, I think we can pick on things like what's happening to children's attention on TikTok, but I don't think that one has played out yet, because I don't know. So the answer to your question is no, because again, history always repeats itself. I want to go back to my childhood. When I'm growing up, the Nintendo comes out. And parents are terrified that we're not going to go play outside in the woods anymore. We're just going to play video games all day long. Today, I think a parent would be thrilled if a kid played video games all day long and got off TikTok. But after the Nintendo came out, we got introduced to cable television, and there was this little thing called MTV. And the biggest fear now was Beavis and Butthead, and then Bart Simpson on Fox. And so the Nintendo was going to destroy human civilization. Then Beavis and Butthead and Bart Simpson were going to destroy human civilization, because he says, eat my shorts. Now today, a parent would love it if a child watched Beavis and Butthead and didn't watch South Park, right? Because Beavis and Butthead is like basically G-rated today. But if we go back to like the 50s when I Love Jeannie came out, she showed her belly button, and that was like, we're freaking out. So then I think, okay, past MTV, then let's just go to the internet. There were chat rooms, and it's like, oh my God, my kids are in AOL chat rooms. They're going to talk to 50-year-old men who pretend to be young girls. This is going to destroy human civilization. Right? None of those things panned out to be true. Yes, there were some predators in chat rooms. Yes, there's more violent behavior because of more violent video games, but like all in, like they were anomalies in the news cycle. They didn't destroy human civilization. There was a net positive to all of this. And then I think about, things like TikTok, Facebook, the origins of it all after MySpace, net positive in that, like, it has connected more humans on the planet than ever before. Yes, are some people using that to disseminate misinformation? Yes. Did we use the printing press to disseminate misinformation? Yes, right? Like did this always happen? And so, we've got to, as a society, I think we get better, not at regulating, but things end up, new technologies negate the negative use, the small negative use of the older technology. So then these things become laughable. That a Nintendo gaming system was ever a problem, that MTV was ever a problem, that now it's like Facebook's a joke. Yes, there's WhatsApp and there's Instagram, and some of these things feel addictive. But if we just fast forward another 10 years, we're going to look at Instagram and TikTok as a joke, and we're going to laugh at them the same way we laugh at Beavis and Butthead today, because there will be a new generation of parents with a new fear that's going to again destroy human civilization. That'll turn out to be a laughable joke.
It's interesting. I remember that because I grew up through that those phases of gaming systems and cable channel TV. And I remember my parents, same thing. And it is interesting. I think sometimes because we look at through the lens of years versus if you really pull it out and you look at the lens of decades and centuries, I think it's interesting. Attention spans have been shortening. And I think if you were just to look at the music we listened to 1,000 years ago to now, it's sped up. There's just more words to consume. The beats are faster. It's not spoken word. It's not, it's not the way it was on in medieval times. And now with TikTok, I actually had this discussion with somebody and I was like, what TikTok's doing? It's actually, and it has actually, I think I just saw a piece of news on it the other day where micro content for TV or, TV shows are coming out where people are watching 1-minute, 2-minute clips and they're just watching a bunch of them in a row. And I think, there's a famous company that was trying to do this. The name escapes me in Hollywood. They failed because they were too early. But we also could probably look back and go, content has been getting shorter and shorter because we have variety and we don't have to watch something for 30 minutes that we just kind of find okay. And kids' attentions are shortening because it's always been shortening. It's just these last 10 years we're observing the new forms of consumption. So I agree with you. I think sometimes we're too close to it. And when we pull out, we see that the trend is the trend. It's been there for a lot longer than just, in this case, TikTok.
Yeah, no, for sure. I remember reading an old story about Plato and Socrates arguing about the written word, but the fear at the time was that it was going to destroy human civilization because children, they wouldn't ever need to speak to each other ever again because they would be able to get everything out of a book. And that was the fear. That's the parents' fear was, oh my gosh, children, well, they're going to lose the ability to speak and to communicate because oration was the profession at the time, right? It's the smartest, best people, they were the orators, and we would lose that. And like, they thought humans would devolve and not be able to speak anymore because of books. And now imagine there was a world where parents were afraid that children would read too many books. Today, like that would be like such a great gift to have your children read books. But I think we're going to, 100 years from now, look back at TikTok in the same vein of like, it was so silly and ridiculous, that occurred and we had that conversation.
100%. I love this discussion because I feel like, the more we talk about how society is actually dealing with technology, sometimes it's even more valuable than the tech itself. And I thought this was a great episode. I'm glad we got to cover it. A lot of things had been on my mind as well, and you articulated them very well. If somebody wants to reach out to you, obviously I know that people might want to learn a little bit more about agree.com or maybe ask you a follow-up question. What are some good ways to connect with you, the company, et cetera?
Yeah, so me personally, I'm big on Twitter, so I'm posting all the time. So it's Marty Madrid, Marty, and then like the city Madrid, all one word. For Agree, again, anybody stop paying for DocuSign. We always say, come on to Agree. It's totally free. And then for anyone who's listening to this, we'll give you a special deal. If you want to come over, the e-signature is free, the invoicing is free, but also if you use us on the payment processing side, we'll waive all transaction fees on your first 100,000 in payments. So it'd be pretty meaningful, especially if you're taking credit card payments today. Love to have you, but I'm just Marty@agree.com. You get the full founder treatment. So I will personally help onboard you. It's totally self-service, but send me an email, send me your contracts. I'll load them up into the platform for you. It'll be a magical 10 out of 10 onboarding experience for you.
There you go. Can't ask for more than that. Marty, thanks for taking the time, man. I appreciate it.
Hey, thank you for having me. This was a fun conversation.
Absolutely. All right. That's it for the episode. We'll be back again. Different guest, different topic. Until then, two things. One, please share this episode with others that might benefit from it, that might have interest in it. I know we talked a little bit less tactical tech. This one's a little bit more about just how actually the history of tech has evolved, unfolded. I think the notion of we get a lot of tech that we never asked for and then learn to adopt and use it and enjoy it is something that we don't actually talk about. It's the first time I'm covering it on the show, and I thought it was a great conversation point that Marty had, and I'm glad we covered this. So definitely share this out with others. Please do that. Also, like, subscribe, comment, let me know how the show's going for you. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.